Welcome back to Showing Missouri, District Missouri, one county at a time. We are joined again by Judge Mary Rose Russell and the Clerk of the Supreme Court, Betsy Ledgerwood AuBuchon. Mutually assured. That's good. Yeah. Betsy, I think everybody knows your husband. What's the time all the politicians are calling him for money? They also call him about late April to play softball. Tell folks about Rich.
Rich is a great guy. Met him at the Capitol. One of the smartest people I've ever met. His personality makes, we both have strong personalities, so it's caused us to have pretty interesting children sometimes. Two big, strong personalities and little bitty bodies, but yeah, no one I'd rather do life with.
Rich is this huge guy who's funny.
He's a Clydesdale. That's what I call him. He's a
Clydesdale.
Clydesdale.
He's this enormous guy, but he's like one of the nicest people in the world. Like, if you really needed something, this big burly dude would come up and make fun of you and tease you and give you literally his shirt. Which
There's been more than one Sunday that he's left to go move people with his truck, and I would say, "Who are you moving?" And he's like, "I don't know. Like, I have no idea who they are. It was someone's grandma or someone's friend or but yeah, no, he is."
That's the guy I've come to know.
Yep.
So how'd you move across the street from the Capitol?
So Rich and I were getting married, and he had been working for Peter Kinder at the time. And we both kind of talked about getting out of politics, just generally. The hours were really crazy.
Most people get that break, don't they?
Yeah.
Where you've done this for your early part of your career, you've got a big book of contacts, and then you kind of either all in or not, right?
Right, yeah. And we had both been single parents, and so we were starting to blend our families. We're like, this is not what we want to do. And so actually Rich saw the ad for the government relations at the Supreme Court, and I was like, no. I don't know, because not a lot of people go from private sector to public sector, especially with the firm that I was with. And but really just kind of wanted to do it for the family and for the greater good, and then got in there and realized that the clerk was only going to be around 5 years, or roughly. He kind of took a liking to me. I'm a highly curious person, and would
Tell
just
the guy you're talking about.
Yeah, living as Bill Thompson, who was I think maybe the 4th or 5th clerk ever. I think I'm the 6th, first female to ever have the job, and just got really curious. And so within 5 years, the court had said, "Hey, do you want to be clerk?" Which was a pretty big deal for someone who hadn't worked in the judiciary.
Number one, what does the clerk do for a person who mostly just gets in trouble with the law, is not a lawyer?
Yeah, I'm the chief administrator of the judiciary statewide. So have a kind of a piece in.
So everybody that has a problem with like parking tickets just calls you.
Not your problems with parking tickets. You're a special case. But no, so I work with the judges not only in our court but across the state and present the budget. I'm the liaison kind of to the other 2 branches of government for the court.
So all the rulings they make, you've got a role in making sure those things get all the paperwork's done correctly and the procedures are followed.
Correct.
So you'll have a new judge to break in, I guess. Here
yeah,
in a
Kelly
month or two.
Broniak. She's going to be a fabulous addition.
You've already going to show her where all the good alcohol is and the where you put your robe and
I've
good
showed her where
parts
to
to
put
eat
her
in
robe.
town.
Right.
Yeah, good
yeah,
deal.
exactly.
Good deal. So did you apply for the Supreme Court more than once, or how when you get on the appellate court, right? I can't really believe that if you wanted to be on the appellate court, you didn't also want to be on the Supreme Court.
Yes, but not right away. Eventually I did apply.
Well, it just kind of feels like if you've done all these things at very young ages, you'd want to whatever the Supreme of anything was, what one you want to be on. So you get on in 95. When did you start seriously thinking, okay, what's what I need to do to move this up?
Probably about 2000 or so, yeah. So the first time I applied, I did not make a panel. Laura Stith from the Western District also applied and did not make a panel. So then the second time I applied, we both made a panel. Laura and I did. And
it's still just Covington on the court, right? Still the only female.
Well, she left.
She left, so there's no females at the time.
Yeah, right. So Laura took the place of Judge Covington, and I did not get the appointment, obviously. So the court could just continue to have its one token female on the court. So when another vacancy came up again, it was now 2004. And I applied, and I was successful in getting that appointment. And now, for the first time, there were 2 women on the Supreme Court, Laura and me, Judge Stith and me.
I've always thought Governor Holden was just such a kind man. If you...
Because he's from where we're from.
Yeah, exactly. He's not from St. Louis. That solves the problem. But I always just thought, when you really think about the kind of heart somebody would have, I would assume there's a bit of pride in you. Obviously being appointed to the Supreme Court, but but also by a guy that's just a good guy.
Yes, he's still a good guy, and we still are good friends.
I was talking to a gentleman that sat right there in that chair, and he spoke at your investiture, attended it, in Governor Blunt.
Governor Blunt didn't speak.
He wasn't governor yet, right?
Right, he was the governor. He sent over his chief legal counsel to speak. In fact, I had asked the chief legal counsel to be one of my speakers because we had worked in the state senate together back when I was in law school. Ken McClure was the person who spoke, and
He's got a pretty big job in Springfield now, right?
yeah, called the mayor.
Yeah, he kept the Cardinals down there. Quite an accomplishment, although that was nice. And they made the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah,
And it's someone for you to call when you get speeding, like parking tickets in Springfield, right?
They have a great policy in Springfield. I've never got one. But it seems like they know what they're doing.
Ken was the Senate research staff when I worked at the Senate, and so we knew each other from way back then.
Well, it's an interesting thing. You come on at the kind of the twilight of Governor Holden's term, right? So you come on the Supreme Court, the second woman. When did it not feel like it was a token thing to have a woman, or, I assume now, I guess I may be in 43. I don't think of it that way. It's not really a concept that jumps to my mind. I will be honest with you. I do see certain things, and I'm like, well, that's kind of because it's a token situation. I really have not thought that about a judge on the Supreme Court in a long time. When do you think that public perception began to erode that, we're going to have a woman on there?
I don't know if I can pinpoint an exact.
I mean, it doesn't
time
feel that way to
period.
me anymore.
Well, and that's good, and it's an outsider and someone who hasn't been in the profession as long as I have. I guess I've just seen it both ways now, and I never thought in my lifetime that I would ever see a majority on our court of females. I spent a good part of my early career as the only female in the room, the only female at the table, and it almost makes me emotional to think that at least now for 2 weeks, until Judge Breckenridge retires, we have a majority of female on our court.
And I think you have the majority female is going to sit this week, right?
Yes.
Judge Brownie's going to come over and sit with you guys on the case?
She's already sworn in. She's in her office and ready to go.
Nice. So what's this investiture? What does that mean?
So it's like an inauguration. It's where the judge who has been appointed can have a little celebration. It's a swearing in of an oath, which is more ceremonial because they've previously already had an official swearing in privately. It's a time of celebration when you can invite your friends and your family to come and speak on your behalf. In some regards, we always say it's like having an early funeral.
Or it turns into a roast, right? One of the two?
It can.
And so Judge Broniak said that she will have an investiture later. I'm not quite sure when it'll be, but there's no time limit and there's no requirement. When I got on the Supreme Court, my mother and father were both very ill, and both of them died within 29 days of my appointment. And so that was in September of 2004, and so I was in no mood to party or celebrate. So I went until March, and then I had my investiture.
So the process. Let's talk about some of the stuff you're doing as Chief Justice. But first, I think it seems very topical to talk about the Missourah plan, the way you were selected. People don't realize Missoura's tried them all, right? They've tried every type of plan out there, and they've settled on one that's become world renowned. So if you're an attorney, any attorney can apply to be on this. Let's just do the Supreme Court. You just had a Judge Broniak selected through the process, and now I guess you have another one coming up here before long. Anybody that's a lawyer can apply?
Got to be 30 years old.
30 years old.
You've got to be a resident of the state of Missouri for a certain period of time. So the Constitution outlines a few basic requirements, a voter, a few requirements like that. Then if you meet those requirements, certainly you can apply. And it's a lengthy application. It's available online for people to look at. It asks questions about your professional history. What kind of practice have you been involved in? What areas of the law did you practice in? Give us some listing of cases that you've tried. Give
Writing
us,
samples.
and list 5 references. They have to write letters of recommendation. So it just sounds like
do people just ping you all the time to be listed as a reference, or?
Well, not for this, but for other jobs, yes.
Okay.
But so it's just kind of like a regular job application, like you would think for any profession.
Seems like a thick one, right?
Well, it is. It's very thorough.
Yeah.
And then, on the personal level, give us a listing of some of the civic activities you've been involved in. What have you done to promote the administration of justice this far in your career? With civic education, have you been involved in helping the public learn more about the judiciary? So then those applications are collected. And then there is, pursuant to the Constitution, this is a 1940 initiative petition that was promoted by a lot of Republicans like Rush Limbaugh, because the prior system of selecting judges had been a straight-out election. Who was the best campaigner and who had the most campaign contributions and who kissed the most babies. And the public got dissatisfied with judges being selected under that process.
You see it in other states, the direct election. And I tell you, it just looks ghastly almost. Because it does look like there's cases that are going to be decided, not by law, but by which interests can elect their judge. And I guess that if that's how you want to do it, but boy, it seems like this plan has kept Missouri in a very good place.
Because the public perception is huge. And
Yeah.
if you just said, if there's a perception that you're going to vote a certain way on a case, if and when it came in front of you, is not fair. It's not an impartial judge. It's not a judge who is going to listen to both sides and have an open mind and decide the law or decide the case based upon the law.
I think there's an old boy in Palmyra swinging a hammer today. That if somebody raised $5 million and $4 million was from one interest, that old boy's going to assume that person has said, I'm going to vote this way, I'm going to rule this way. I don't think you could convince a common sense person that that's not the way that would go.
Well, hopefully Missouri, the show me state, I agree with you.
That's right.
But Wisconsin,
Yeah,
they just
that's
had
what I
an
was thinking.
election for a statewide Supreme Court judge, and $42 million was spent. And so we should not be bought. We should not be about money. It's not who has the most money or the biggest muscle that should win in our courtroom.
It's kind of the place you go to square that if you don't have the most money or the biggest muscle.
Well,
That's kind of the
right.
place you come to for refuge if you don't have the gun to do that.
We are required to be accountable to the law and not to any special group or special friend or person. And if a case came and it was my next door neighbor or relative, I would recuse myself from the case, and another judge would be appointed to take my seat. If I felt
It's like a person running. If I see that Rich has a client that gives significantly to someone, it makes me think that person probably supports whatever that interest does. I seldom see people write checks for things that are going to be against them.
Right.
It's
We
common
always
sense.
say, if you sued the Cardinals, God forbid, and then you walked in and every judge on the bench was wearing a Cardinals hat, would you feel like you had a very good shot?
I would feel like you're Don Dinkins and you're going to get what you deserve. The reckoning has come.
But yeah, it's the legislative branch that's supposed to do what the people want, and it's the judges who are supposed to say what the law, do what the law tells them to do, as written by the people who are directly represented. And I think people get confused about that sometimes.
It is. It's the biggest misnomer about judges is that we decide cases on our personal beliefs. And I can tell you there's a lot of opinions that I've signed and opinions that I've written that I've had to hold my nose because I personally would not have ruled that way. But for the way the law was worded, the way the Constitution was worded, I was bound to follow it. And so when I go out and speak to public groups, I love to take examples. I love to take real life cases that we've had, give them the facts, show them the statute that we had to interpret or the constitutional provision that we had to interpret, and say, how would you decide this case? Are you going to let the drunk driver go free? Are you going to let this happen that you don't really like? And because you took an oath to be bound by the law, you end up making some decisions that you personally don't like, but we are accountable to the law as written by the legislature. The Constitution is written by the people.
But isn't part of it that there is some discretion in that, right? And your life experience, upbringing, where you're from, who your kinfolks are, it's got to color that a little bit, right?
Well, some people look at things through a different lens, and perhaps me being from the country, I might look at it through a different lens than somebody from an urban area.
And not that, there are some pieces of this that is not just totally black and white, right? There are innovative things that come up that the law maybe just hasn't caught up with, and you've got to make a decision. And I would think in that situation, your background, where you're from, how you were brought up would have some coloring of how you'd view the world.
And there's rules of construction on how we interpret statutes. It's the same rules of construction that federal courts, including the United States Supreme Court, uses. The first rule is, look at the plain language. What do these words mean? If the word is confusing, look at the dictionary definition. And then if it's still not helpful, then we can employ these rules of construction, looking at statutes nearby, looking at older statutes. There's a variety of rules of construction that we look at. What's the legislature's intent?
Yeah.
If we can determine that.
But when they
That
talk
could be
about
scary these days.
yeah, or just the Constitution, or when our forefathers wrote it, and they were our fathers, they just didn't contemplate AI,
Yeah.
or social media, or guns that shot more than one bullet at a time. I mean, that's not speaking to it. It was just something that wasn't in their realm of comprehension. Right.
You can only comprehend the world you live in. You can't,
right.
avoid it.
Exactly.
So if you apply for this, you're taken seriously, right? Even if it's a person, anybody in the state that applies, you treat them professionally, respectfully, right? They can go to the commissioners or yourself and try to get a private meeting, and if one is granted, then they can make their case privately now, right? Before the big throwdown.
And any applicant can ask a commissioner, would you be willing to talk to me, to get to know me? And the commissioner can say, I'm sorry, I don't have time, or let's do it on the phone, or let's do a Zoom, or you can come to my office, or sorry, I just don't have time to do it.
Well, I mean, if you really want the job, you're probably going to make time to go to them, right? I mean, that's sort of part of it. I would think if you're a commissioner, it would matter if a person wants to put the effort in to come see him. And you're, as Chief Justice, it's a 2-year rotating thing, right?
Yes.
So that's part of your job as Chief Justice, is you're presiding over the selections of this commission. The commission is broke up into 3 different districts, and it has someone from the Bar Association, correct?
Lawyers from the eastern side of the state elect one person to be the representative on the commission. The lawyers from the western side, the same, and the lawyers from the southern region of the state also do the same thing. They each send one lawyer to serve a 6-year term, which they're staggered by district.
And Missouri is a mandatory bar state, so any lawyer who's licensed in Missouri is a member of the bar.
So how does it work inside the bar to become one of these commissioners?
So if you're wanting to run for this, so there are different areas of the state where we have the nonpartisan court plan. If it's in a circuit like in Greene County, then when an election comes up for one of those lawyer positions, you would file a petition with the clerk of the Southern District. If you're running for the Appellate Judicial Commission, which is the commission that does the appeals court and the Supreme Court, then when that lawyer position becomes open for election in each district, then you file a petition with the Supreme Court.
And the lawyers in that area vote?
Correct. So if you're registered and you are live in the Western District of the state of Missouri, then when there is a lawyer position open, then you vote in that district for that
correct.
position.
If I'm wrong, if you want the Judicial Commission, the 3 lay people have to be one from each part of the state.
Correct.
But the governor just picks one, right?
Right. They can't be a lawyer. They are lay people, and then the governor picks.
So, you give anybody advice? I'm sure when about that, this is not a commission that you get on happenstance. You have to be somebody that is I assume within the bar, but certainly for a lay position, it's a very sought after appointment. One of maybe the most sought after ones in the state. They come around, and I assume would come and ask you, well, okay, what does this do? Do you give people advice? You say,
yeah, nobody's ever asked me.
Really? Huh. If they did, what would you tell them this commission does?
It's a very important commission, and first off, you've got to be committed to the time it would take. You never know.
How many people applied for the Supreme Court opening?
Well, so this last one, it was about 22, and then like a week later, we were interviewing people for a vacancy on the Court of Appeals Eastern District, which was some crossover, but about 23 total, but some duplication.
35, 40, and they all have this enormously thick packet that you have to read. And I assume you have to read, the Eastern District one's a little different, so you'd have to read even if they applied for the same one. Then you meet with them. I mean, that is significant time. I mean, Tim Drury's someone I know in there. He's a busy guy. He's got a lot of business commitments, family commitments. That is a big time commitment, isn't it?
Yeah, it was probably 80 hours before you even sit down to the public interview. So yes, it just happenstance that
I've
they
seen
occurred.
everyone I've ever seen on that commission takes it very seriously.
Yes, yes.
It
and
is
I'm-
a very serious thing. In the news business, you'll see people leak still things and stuff. That process, you could just tell the people it's not something anybody messes with. It is I don't say solemn, but it's taken extremely seriously.
We give a stern warning to all the commissioners about confidentiality. If we want commissioners to speak open and frank, and especially the attorney members who are speaking open and frank about maybe a sitting judge who wants to move up to a higher court, and if they're quoted saying something negative about a sitting judge, it could have negative implications for them in their
Lots
practice.
of commissions give their people the same speech or a similar speech, and in my line of work, it doesn't always hit. That commission, it doesn't matter who the chief justice is. I've always just seen it is taken extremely seriously.
That's good to hear.
And professionally. I mean, in my business, you don't mind a good leak every so often or a good tip, but you almost respect somebody that takes something like that because it is a very serious thing they're doing that affects every Missourian in some way.
Yes, and there's a lot of good applicants, and you wish you could put more than 3 on the final list. And so you're sorry that only 3 can be picked, but that's the way our process works.
Let me just review it real quick because I want to talk about some other things we're doing when we have a little bit of time left. So you apply. You hopefully go meet as many commissioners as you can, make your pitch privately. You fill out this enormous book of stuff to let people kind of get a sense of who you are. And then you come into this room and you get peppered with questions by these 7 people about your career or your views or whatever, stemming from their conversation, your packet. And then you all go off on almost like the Cardinals when they pick the Pope, right? You got to go into a room and start to whittle down this 22 into 3. What's that like? I mean, is it when you sit down, what is your goal?
Well, it's difficult because again, there are so many well-qualified people, and trying to come up with the 3 best. Maybe the criteria in my mind are different than some of the other commissioners.
It probably should be, right? That's
Well,
kind of how it works.
And maybe the letters of recommendation have had different influence on different people. And maybe you've worked directly with the judge because you are a current judge or you are a current lawyer. So everybody's got a different experience level and a different familiarity level with each applicant.
That's what's so great about the lay people too, because they're looking at totally different things,
Yeah.
and a different sense of the person, and so their input is just from the public part that I've seen is beyond valuable because they just kind of pick up some things sometimes that if you're just looking at it through a legal lens, you might not see.
Well, I find it so interesting, especially when people are first on, to get their take on what it was like. They're always surprised by something. There's always something that is a surprise about the process or about this person impressed me because of X, and I'm like, that's what impressed you? No, really? And to me, that's just an interesting thing about the mix of people that go into this process. I guess it's varied for a reason, because you want a different crew. So when you get in that room, I don't know I don't want to ask something that you can't ask, but what is that like in that room? Do you just start, I like this person or that person, or?
We read everyone's name off and give everyone a chance to make a comment about that name, and then we start our voting.
So what's the longest you ever had to vote to get your list down to 3?
Oh, no, I did this when I was chief before for Court of Appeals vacancies, maybe 3.5 hours.
Shoo, boy.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's probably the longest.
You ever had anybody ticked off before it was over?
Yeah, no, you people get tired though.
I can see that. I can see that. So they usually vote the same day you do the interviews?
Well, we sometimes, depending upon the number of applicants, the interviews could take 2 days. But at the tail end of the interviews being completed, we try to go right into session to vote.
So when you actually get your 3, what happens?
Then we call the 3 to tell them they have been selected. A press release goes out.
Do you get a piece of paper that you send to the governor's office, or
Yeah,
how's that work?
we have a certification that just says the 3 names and the rounds of votes and how many votes they ended up with individually, and then we send that on, and then according to the rule, then that's what is public, is that certification is what's public out of the private meeting, and then the information from that applicant, those 3 applicants that are chosen, is what's made public.
Yeah, their applications in
Become
full.
public.
So when you get, I've watched panels I thought were interesting. I've watched panels that were like the last one. It did feel like this Republican governor could have picked any of those 3 judges and felt good about it from his own political views, from caring about the judiciary, from picking somebody to do a good job. It really feels like you picked three people that absolutely he could have picked and been proud of.
Try to make the job difficult for the governor.
Yeah, I can see that.
Try to give him three really well qualified people that we think that the governor would be happy to see. That he would feel if I made that appointment, it would be a good reflection upon my administration. And I think that's kind of the feedback we heard, but that this was a difficult panel for him.
Well, I'm sure, yeah. I mean, it is interesting because I've seen some that look like, well, maybe he had one or two. This time he actually had three folks he could have totally, in good conscience, picked. That's going to make you feel good when you leave the room.
Yeah, and I hope we can do that
And
again.
you had to know that, right?
Well, I hope so. You know, you never know, but you hope so. I mean, then the ball's in his court, and then what the governor wants to do at that point is his lane, and we step back.
Yep, and a governor has 60 days from when they get a panel to make an appointment.
Has a governor ever not picked?
Not in Missouri.
What would happen if you don't pick? You guys get to pick?
Under the Constitution, it goes back to the commission.
It'd be a bad way to do it, though. I mean, this system, everybody's got a little skin in that game, and it feels like the right way to go about it, you know? So I have been over to the Supreme Court recently. I've seen they got some stuff taped off or walled off, and I know the legislature appropriated some money to increase the library. What's going to happen over there?
So right now we're just improving our HVA system and some other structural problems with our building. It's over 100 years old. We were finished with construction in 1907. So an older building like that is constantly needing
So
repair.
it got done just in time to watch Capitol burn, right?
Yeah, actually, we were, the Senate met in our building when the Capitol was burning, so we are older than the Capitol.
Now, your actual chambers has been restored pretty close to what it was?
So
The actual place where you I know you used to have two courtrooms, right?
we do, and Betsy has been the great historian in trying to restore our courtrooms to their original splendor. And
Yeah, they're back to probably 98% of what they were historically. We've had to do some things like put in carpet that they didn't have just for acoustics and that, but they are. And we're slowly working on the whole building. And then in the library, we're putting in a judicial discovery center to try to do a better job of teaching kids about the third branch.
Isn't that interesting? I mean, there's so many kids. I talk to so many people that are in education, and they bring their fourth graders up, and they always like, well, I don't know what to do. I'm like, well, come here, let me tell you. You should go to the nature center, and you should go. I mean, there's a way to take a fourth grade class and not just roll them through the Capitol and have them bored to death. I mean, there's a way to do Jeff City that you could spend a legitimate full day, but I don't know where you'd send them to the courthouse except just to look around, which I don't think a kid would care about.
well, we have tours that our law clerks and if requested, that judges participate in too, of our building and of the courtroom, and try to explain the process to them. But we think there's a better way of doing it, a way that maybe can be more interactive.
Well, I mean, every kid walks around with an iPad all day like this. There's got to be something that could be better, you know.
So we've got a great design in mind, and
General Assembly has given us money to work towards it, and so we're hoping by May, June to have that up and running.
That took you
Very
all, what, about a
exciting.
year to get your money? I mean, that's pretty good for Jeff City, right?
we were very fortunate. The legislature has been very kind to us.
So it's interesting that I'm sure a lot of folks watching this will know, but some folks might not. You actually have apartment space in your chambers.
So the building was built again in 1907. There was only one hotel in Jefferson City. And the legend is that attorneys and lawyers were all coming into, attorneys and judges were all coming into Jefferson City and staying at the one and only hotel. And it probably was, again, legendary that a lawyer would go up to a judge and say, hey, judge, I got a case with you tomorrow. Can I buy you a soda pop? Well, we can't be bought anything. So by keeping the judges away from that hotel, by having little mini chambers, if you will, for the seven of us, that's how the building is still set up today. Now, over time, some judges have lived in town, some judges have lived elsewhere, but you spend your own money on how you want to fix it up. We don't get per diem like legislators. So the girls, we fix ours up a little nicer than the boys.
I've noticed that.
And so I love staying there. And anyway, it's very nice to be able to get up and start working and go to bed late and work, and it's very convenient.
Well, it is interesting. I've watched. You're in session not all year, but a good chunk of the year. And when you're in town, you could just focus on almost like a senator. When you come to Jeff City, you could be working 80% of that time, and then you When you're done, you can leave town.
We don't hear typically new cases in June, July, or August, typically, unless there's an emergency. But our work goes on all year round. We all come all year round. It's a full-time job, and there's lots of other responsibilities and duties besides just writing opinions.
So tell folks how a case gets to you. So there's a circuit court. They make a ruling. Like I saw Judge Beadham's making rulings today on ballot initiatives. How would that case get to you?
So a typical case would go straight up the judicial triangle, if you can imagine that in your mind. But as you said, the case starts with a trial in the circuit court, which is the trial court, in front of a judge or a jury. When a judgment is entered by the court, the trial court, according to our Constitution, everyone is guaranteed one automatic right to an appeal, no matter what the value of your case is, $5, $50 million. That appeal would be heard by the next level up, which is called the Court of Appeals. And there's three districts.
If people are reading the news today, they'll see Judge Beadham made some rulings about ballot initiatives. If they were to choose to appeal, that would go to the Western District in Kansas City, correct?
Yes, that's correct. At the Western District Court of Appeals, they'll make a decision. They're kind of a little bit like the instant replay camera. When decisions are appealed on the baseball field by an umpire who's called someone out or safe, where do those decisions go to?
Well, previously Don Dinkinger just stole World Series with it, but yes, they go to New York and a higher body and all that.
So, and this summer I went to see that New York MLB.
Oh, what was that like?
Way cool. 9 umpires sit around 9 different screens. A majority rule makes the decision. I took pictures.
Do you like it? Do you like the instant replay thing?
Yes.
I can't hardly get over how that wasn't there for us when we needed it, but everybody else gets it. But I do think it's better. I think it's better.
In any event, the Court of Appeals then will make a decision. They sit in panels of 3 judges at a time. They will issue what's called an opinion. If you are the losing party in that opinion, then you have to ask the Supreme Court of Missouri for permission for us to hear your case. The Constitution says, Supreme Court judges, you can't just take every case you're asked to hear. You're only allowed to hear cases that are of statewide interest or general importance. So each month we may get 30 to...
That term seems a little vague, though, up to your interpretation, right?
That's right. So each month we may get 30 to 40 applications to transfer for people who lost at the Court of Appeals, and we decide which ones we think are of statewide interest or general importance. And like you said, there's a lot of things that we look at. Is it a brand new statute that's never been interpreted before? Is it a conflict? Is the Eastern District Court of Appeals ruled one way on the same issue, the Western Districts ruled the opposite way? We want to take those cases so we can resolve the conflict and the law can be uniform throughout the state.
So you have to have 4 votes to get a case taken up?
Everything at our court works on 4 votes.
Even to order lunch. But now there are some cases you have to take that come directly. So if it's challenging a provision of the Constitution or a statute, it would come to the Supreme Court. Death penalty cases come to the Supreme Court, and cases dealing with tax.
So those are 3 exceptions to going straight up the triangle. If you're challenging the constitutionality of a statute, trial court hears it, losing party appeals to the Supreme Court, and we have no discretion. We have to hear it. And as Betsy just said, in positions of death penalty, have to come straight to us. We have no screening power over it. And then the final category, again, is taxes or revenue laws that affect the state treasury, income tax, state sales tax, those kind of things.
When you first started, how hard was a death penalty case, knowing that you
They're always
played
hard.
a role?
They're still hard.
Right or wrong, that's just, I would think that'd be a real emotional thing.
Yeah, it is very draining on all of us, then and now.
And, I mean, there are laws you have to follow, but you can't just say, well, I feel bad. I mean, that's where the law part would kick in. That's over your emotions. But gosh, I mean, that's no matter what you do. That's truly a challenge. But no matter what you do, there's a real challenge, I would think, just emotionally.
It's true.
So tell me something good about the court. What is different about the court now? You said you gave a speech about the last time you were the Chief Justice and now. What's better about Missouri's judiciary?
Just a lot of change and a lot of good change. With technology, we've been able to open up our courts to make it more accessible to the public. CaseNet is our software system where the public can log in and read the pleadings that otherwise they would have had to go to a courthouse and ask a clerk to hand
I've
me
had
the
some
file
people be
across.
worried that that's a little too much.
Well, and we
It's a fine
do,
line, isn't it?
it is, and there are certain cases that are clamped down because maybe they're a juvenile court case. And there's other categories of cases that aren't public, that are.
And a judge has a discretion to keep some things concealed, correct? Or,
Well, sometimes it's controlled by statute.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's maybe the parties requesting it because of sensitive private.
and the great thing, amazing thing about technology is it has all these possibilities, but all these possibilities, there's nothing's all good or all bad. There's always a challenge, and probably the only way you're ever going to get it right is to do it, and then over time mold it and craft it, right?
And the pandemic speeded up some
Yeah.
of our technology changes. For example, now maybe you don't have to take off work to do make an appearance in a courtroom. You can go, to your break room and turn on your iPad and have an appearance in a courtroom. You don't have to leave, someone you're caretaking for. So there's been a lot of changes in technology. There's changes in the composition of our bar, composition of our bench. There's just been changes on a lot of fronts. Types of cases that we hear today, jury trials, civil jury trials from the year 2000 to today, down 76%. So there's just almost a whole different profession.
It's a really interesting thing. It feels like to me the Missouri judiciary is in one of the best states it's ever been in. I think you have more support from more parts of the state, more supports from more parts of different political parties than maybe they ever have. Now, that's obviously, like I think one case, somebody could change their mind.
Right.
But overall, I think judiciary is in a tremendously, not, I wouldn't say powerful, but I would say popular position, and starts off with the benefit of the doubt. The federal judiciary seems like it's going the opposite way, and I never thought in my life I would say that. Does that ever concern you?
Well, we don't comment on their decisions or their opinions, but there's things that we do that are different than the way the federal courts work. For example, we're not appointed for life. Judges that serve on any court in the state of Missouri have to retire at age 70.
Is that a good thing?
Yes, it is a good thing.
I assume you lose some good judges.
You sure do.
And you probably lose a few that were probably good judges, but it might be time.
Yeah, it goes both ways.
Yeah.
But if you want to stay on as a senior judge, you can. And many of our judges who've turned 70 stay on as a senior judge and continue to work on a more limited basis and a special transfers or appointments by the court. So we get the benefit of both.
But I do think we have to be concerned, regardless of whether we can speak on their cases, just because, Scott, how many times have you heard people in Jeff City refer to the Missouri General Assembly as Capitol Hill?
Oh, 100%.
And think it's Congress. And so
100%.
by the same token, we come in every morning and have voicemails that people think that we're the U.S. Supreme Court. And so that's why it's so important to try to educate the public that they are different, and the reputation of one can affect another, even though we are very
that
different.
Makes total sense to me. I mean, you have a time when, as a country, it's a very odd time on a bunch of different levels. But Missouri's been able to stay out of some of that stuff, and I think maybe the judiciary is part of that. It's part of that turmoil and just angst. But lastly, it just, to me, I've got to know Judge Covington a little bit. And I don't know her particularly well, but I know that every time she walks into a room, there's a presence she has. And you know that a very dignified, intelligent, accomplished woman is in the room with you. And, I would just wonder, I don't know how much you talk to her, but have you talked to her since Judge Broniak was appointed? I mean, this week you'll have a majority of women hearing a case. I would assume that she feels some pride in that, being the first woman, and there's a legacy that she really was the touch point of starting.
Yeah, I do talk to her periodically, and I know she's proud of it, and it's just unbelievable for all of us.
Yeah.
She was our godmother.
Truly our queen in a lot of ways. It's just as far as a...
And because she had the right temperament and she was the right person at the right time, she wanted to make sure that she wasn't the last woman when she was appointed.
Yeah.
And she's kept the door open.
That
for
sounds
all of
funny
us.
today, but I'll bet you that went through her mind. Because
Could've been
it's a different world.
Yeah, it could have been a different personality of a woman that could have shut the door for a while on us.
Yeah.
But she helped all of
I
us.
said it opened it more, yeah.
Yes, and she has been a big supporter and cheerleader, and she always says she wants more skirts on the bench. So yes, we all love her and respect her, and we've just got to get a picture of all of us now, all the way down to
Oh,
Kelly
yeah.
Broniak, and bring back
Wow.
Judge Stith and Judge Breckenridge
Third,
before she leaves.
of
So we need
everybody.
to get that scheduled.
All right, I'll get right on that.
I thought She worked for you.
Well, the camera's on. We'll go back to the, yeah.
Well, look, I've taken more of your time than I asked for. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed the visit. Judge Will, thank you so much. Betsy, I sure appreciate the time. I want to thank the Association of Electric Co-ops and Missouri Farm Bureau for letting us have this conversation about a truly legendary person. And I think a plan that every bit like Farm Bureaus, Missouri, like co-ops or Missouri, the Missouri plan has done so much to help shape the state and help protect the state. I appreciate you coming in and letting us talk about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next week.